Just in time. Well, everybody, we would like to introduce Frank Mylar, who is running for
Attorney General.
and
You just got the Veterans Association nomination.
I did, yes.
Yeah, and I'm a veteran. I wasn't able to attend that meeting, but yeah.
I'm so excited to talk to you, and I appreciate you being on today. I know you are right smack dab in the middle of a trial.
Yep.
And as a practicing attorney, this has got to be one hell of a tough gig, running for office.
I honestly don't think hardly anyone's ever done this that's run for any office, is my guess. Certainly not in Utah, certainly not for Attorney General. I'm the only one actually practicing law right now, and I'm practicing a little bit more than I want right now. I filed a 10th Circuit brief last Monday, a week ago Monday, and a U.S. Supreme Court brief on Friday, then started this trial on Monday, this Monday. But what most people don't realize, in a federal court trial like this, is a constitutional law trial, there is numerous motions that lead up to that for the 2 weeks preceding it. So honestly, I've been over the top full-time practicing and also trying to campaign.
Well, I'm sure. And I was reading your website.
What's this here?
Oh, it's still got. I was reading your website, and so you do take a lot of constitutional law cases.
Most of them, yeah.
And I love that, which is like, I'll bet that's a lot of the reason why the veterans went for you, because they believe in the Constitution.
I have to say that near and dear to my heart is law enforcement. And that's something that you too have near and dear to yours, because you're doing a lot of defense of municipalities and law enforcement and civil liberty cases on behalf of our local law enforcement. Isn't that correct?
That's absolutely correct. Not only am I the only candidate that's actually prosecuted criminals, but I've also been involved in law enforcement for quite some years, 12 years at the AG's office. But then when I went into private practice in about 2001, then I started being asked by the sheriffs to defend them against a number of cases. And it's actually just really blossomed. By God's grace, I am really considered one of the top law enforcement defense attorneys in the state. Sometimes I actually get called by people from other states to help them out on some law enforcement defense suits. So, in fact, I just got a call a few months ago for someone in another state. But so, yeah, this is something I actively do. I know some candidates talk about how they want to meet with the sheriffs, and the AG hasn't been meeting with the sheriffs associations. I do all the time. I mean, it's already happening. I'm also the only candidate that actually teaches yearly at the Utah Sheriff's Association meeting. I've also taught before to the Utah Prosecution Council. So this is speculation to everyone else, but I'm actually in the trenches fighting, defending police, defending sheriff deputies, and defending sheriffs.
Now, can I just say, though, I don't think that maybe the public thinks something else when they think, oh, you're an attorney who protects police officers. But the truth of the matter is that when actually ever there's a question where a law enforcement officer has to have themselves defended, it's usually because there's an accusation thrown at them, or maybe their city or their county's not backing them. Their liberties. I mean, they're Americans just like you and I, and they could be in deep trouble for something that they didn't do, or that, it's a judgment of the people rather than by the law. And they've got to defend themselves from the media. And I don't think people realize that an attorney that fights for law enforcement is incredibly valuable to fight for the civilian as well, because you know both sides there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say this, that one of the reasons I wanted to work in the AG's office about the first 12 years of my career was you can actually do justice. It is exactly the same with the sheriffs. Once in a long while, and I'm going to tell you it is a long while, but every once in a while, we find out that we screwed up. Every time, because they know that I'll fight all the way to trial if we didn't do anything wrong. They respect me when I say, hey, sheriff, hey, Department of Corrections, hey, whoever it is, we did something wrong. We need to make it right and get it resolved. And so it isn't just a defense at all costs. It literally, the sheriffs understand this too. They understand because they're separately elected officials.
Right.
And they know, they care about the Constitution. I'm talking about the rural sheriffs especially, but I represent everyone except Salt Lake County. And a lot of these sheriffs are extremely constitutionally minded, and they want to follow the Constitution. So when I say, look, we screwed up here, they listen and they go, you're right, let's get this resolved. But on the other hand, as we know, it's maybe 100 times, 99 times out of 100, they're right. They did everything right, and they shouldn't be blamed for it just because the media likes sensationalism.
Or someone like Sim Gill likes to get someone's head. And so,
Well, I think
Yep.
Sim Gill does that because it's popularity amongst his voting
Yep.
base.
right. And he
Yep.
gets really vicious in his election year. And then funny, after he's elected, he drops charges all of a sudden. It's quite amazing how he works. But as far as the AG's office, my goodness. So now you want to be an elected attorney general. What about your practice? What happens? Do you continue to defend our law enforcement agent? Like who's going to be there for them? Because an AG has to be representing the state and the civilian and the law enforcement. Like how does that work?
Absolutely. First of all, one of the reasons I'm running for AG is because of all the other constitutional suits I also do, which is, relevant to free speech, pro-life, defending parents in school against school districts, these kinds of things, wanting to kick the DOJ, Department of Justice, out of the Davis County School District. These things, I've done these kinds of things before, and I want to do it now. And so I'm really have a passion and desire to continue in a more concerted way representing constitutional rights. But there's also, as an attorney general, a lot of leadership I can give the sheriffs because I already know some of the issues and problems, like with immigration, like with federal overreach. These are things I'm already plugged in to what's going on in these rural areas. And that's why I'm particularly ready to actually assume this role. And so, for instance, there was kind of a rogue attorney, county attorney that Mike Smith in Utah County had to deal with. Didn't believe in the death penalty, was letting criminals off, right?
Oh, geez. We remember he ran for attorney general once.
He did. And I'll tell you this, that it was a real problem because the AG's office never stepped in. They should have, because the case that I was defending the county on at the time, he was one of the plaintiff's attorney, believe it or not. And he withdrew during the entire time he was in office.
That's not even legal.
No, it's not. It's unethical. And I actually, took it to trial and we won, but it was just crazy. But that was really only the tip of the iceberg. And so it was really, I know it's frustrating for Mike Smith, trying to say, well, this is what you can do, and this is what we can't do. And it'd be nice if the AG's office gave some leadership here, but they didn't. And so there's a lot of times where an AG can actually help out and say, wait a minute, we need to do something right here. We need to help this process. So I'm convinced, that there'll still be some good attorneys. I'm working with one right now, Blake Hamilton, who's helping me out in this trial that I'm in right now. He's been a lifesaver because he's an experienced attorney as well that defends law enforcement. And so I think there's some people that will be able to help in these areas. So I'm not abandoning them.
Yeah.
But I'm hoping that this will help enable me to help law enforcement more, but also help the citizens more regarding constitutional cases.
So your involvement with rural area sheriffs, especially, you probably have heard the issues than federal lands have, like in a county like ours, county like Washington. Our federal lands are 80+% owned by the federal government. Our lands are. And this is something that I've asked every AG candidate because we really need to get some of that back. And I was told by a prior governor, Governor Herbert, that we needed the president and we needed the House and the Senate to get our lands back. Yeah. And I know our current attorney general had put together a case to go before the Supreme Court and, ready to go. But it wasn't all on board with the state wasn't on board with going for it yet, saying we get one bite at the apple. And if we lose there, we could lose our fight. Is that something that a new AG could come in and change? Do they need the governor's approval on that?
Yes and no. There's a lot that can be done. And I will also tell you this, that attorneys, including the current one, did not have a lot of experience in litigating these kinds of issues before he came to office. So it's all speculation or somebody that tells him what you should do. But I'm an attorney that's been litigating for over 36 years. I've learned over the years to think outside the box. I'm not constrained by all these things that, oh, well, we can't do it. No, I don't take that. I don't take that as that I just need to give up and don't do anything. In fact, and again, what I kind of keep saying with every issue on the platform almost, and every issue that my competitors want to bring up, I'm already doing it, or I have done it. And so I'm already helping fight the feds today in a lawsuit against Eastern Utah regarding a railroad that is going to hopefully transport waxy crude that's being nickel and dimed by procedure over substance by the District of Columbia Court of Appeals, trying to empower the lower agency to look at every conceivable hypothetical environmental thing that might be relevant, even though it's not even part of that agency. The Service
Oh my gosh,
Board. Yeah, so I'm already fighting these issues. I have a plan how I'm going to fight them more. But I'm going to tell you, it is lands, and we need one, cattle ranchers need to be able to use these lands with without what they're doing. They're trying to squeeze them off. Two, we need law enforcement to be able to enforce laws. They're trying to push law enforcement off.
right.
And three, we need to be able to recreate on these lands. They're closing them off for that. And so what my point is take back step by step. And I want to start saying, no, some of these lands just should outright be Utah lands, not just
Right.
we want more control of the feds owning our land. And I think I'm the only one that's ever talked about that thing. Mark my words, another candidate's going to pick it up. But I'm talking about, no, these should be Utah lands. When we became a state and when other states became a state, a lot of times this federal government transferred over those federal ownerships, but they didn't do that in Utah. And some people like to say, well, that was the agreement, blah, blah, blah. No, I don't like to take that for a reason not to try that. I think it's a reason to look at, when we became a state, and those lands were never transferred.
Yeah, because we're a sovereign state.
Yeah.
Yeah, isn't that fall under the Enclave Act? I mean, that's just a blatant breach.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of ways. I'm also going to look at. I'm going to also have a design with the legislature to say, look, sometimes we need to pass some laws to push the feds out, so that they're actually creating a good argument again for appeal to make the feds have to sue us after some things that we are doing. And one of them would, and one of them would be that that a sheriff is in charge of law enforcement in every square inch of his county, and he's responsible for that. And that means if he has to go on federal land to investigate, he needs to be able to do that. And so, do I want to work with the Congress and president? Absolutely, but they didn't get it done when we've had them. Because I ran on this issue back in 2000. Mark Shurtleff finally agreed to file a suit only because I made it an election issue back then. And then, but it didn't really accomplish that much. The fight is getting worse. We're losing. It's not like it's even static. And so if you talk to ranchers down there, they're getting pushed off. Law enforcement's getting pushed off. So it's time to actually push back with a full court press, not just wait around for the right lawsuit, not just wait around for a governor.
What about when a sheriff expects the ATF or the FBI who's coming into their county to either make an arrest or do a 6 a.m. no-knock warrant? What about that type of federal agency having to report to a sheriff before walking in? Because in Utah County, that gentleman could be alive today had they gone to the sheriff.
Yeah, they need to do that. And that's one of the things that I'm going to push for is saying, look, you have to, any law enforcement that comes in, the state usually does that because they usually know they have to. Another county does that when they go into another county, to execute a warrant or, arrest somebody. And so it should be the same kind of an arrangement where the sheriff has to know what those kinds of things that are going on in his jurisdiction.
Fred Sween asks, what can you do about federal overreach? And that's kind of a broad question, but I think he's talking about the immigration issue. He's talking about the education issue, all the ABC agencies that are
Yes.
encroached in our government. And what's sad is, we need someone to fight.
Yep.
We don't need to play along to get along anymore. I think we're in a place earlier in the show we talked about people are sick and tired of the norm.
Yep.
We're done. We're done with the federal government abusing us. We're done with them taking our money. But as we just talked with Tina Cannon, it's the state's taking our money too.
Yes.
And
yes.
we have to get a way to fight for the people. And isn't that who you represent?
Yes.
Or do you represent the government as well?
No, I represent the people. When you act like you represent the government, it actually sounds like Hegel, who said the state is the actualization of the ethical idea, which is from where Nazism was drawn from a lot of things that Hegel had said. And
let me just bring up a quick point on Twitter of a conversation I had with Mikkel, who told on his Twitter feed the governor should appoint the AG and the governor should appoint the school board, where I then said, well, that's exactly the recipe for a tyrannical government.
Yep.
And he argued with me, well, the AG represents the state and represents the government. And I said, no, he represents the people. He represents the businesses. He represents, basically you're the attorney general of the state. And then he quickly removed his Twitter feed.
Yeah, it's just a terrible grasp of power, because it wasn't just the AG, it was also the auditor, which is a very important check that you just had earlier. Treasurer, and also the state school board. You don't want to consolidate power. The framers of our Constitution, they drew from people like Locke and Hobbes and these people who said, look, this is a social contract to limit government from being oppressive to the citizens.
And checks and balances on government.
Yes, and they basically came from the approach that it's a necessary evil to have this social contract, but let's keep it in its boundaries. Let's not let it spread all these tentacles and take control. And it has unfortunately done that. Federal overreach is an example sometimes of the state not doing what it needs to do, and then the feds just come in like it's a vacuum. That's part of the problem that I want to lead us out of. Secondly, it's just overreaching in general, like they do on the lands. But thirdly, it's not just the lands. It's like the Department of Justice that's being asked in by somebody. I don't know if it was AG's office or who, but it seems like they were been invited in to take control of the Davis County School District. Now,
yeah, that's a big one I've heard about.
What is it?
The Department of Justice has taken over the Davis County School District. They had a bullying issue, if I remember, and for some reason someone invited them in and they've taken it over. They're running it.
How's that legal?
It's legal if you either one, let them in, or two, you don't do anything about it once they come in. Here's another place that you need to know about is they're trying to come into our State Department of Corrections too, the Department of Justice. They've come up with a ruling regarding transgender surgeries and them being required, something we have to do. Now that's contrary to existing 10th Circuit Court of Appeals precedent from where our state is in the 10th Circuit. And I've actually cited that case before in the past, for various reasons, but years ago, but it's still good case law. And so there's a real problem when the Department of Justice is trying to say what we need to do to our prisons and jails.
Our Department of Justice nationally has been doing great lately. I can't imagine anyone would question that. But isn't the DOJ trying to come in because a couple weeks ago an inmate cut his own
testicles off.
His own wedding tackle off.
Yep.
And so now they're going to drop knee for someone who's got a mental problem.
Yeah.
They're going to drop knee and upset the whole system.
Yep.
Because of less than 0.01%
but I
of
want to
everything.
See this to the end, like you always say. Let's say that they do get the surgery paid for by the state of Utah taxpayer, and then what? We put them in the female prison with women where they can be abused and violated and impregnated, depending on whatever they don't have.
I know if I was going to get beat up in the yard, I'd I'd much rather be
What
beat up by a
guy-
whole bunch of girls.
Yeah, what guy wouldn't claim to be a
Yeah.
woman? And that turns us into California.
Yes.
And that's nuts. That's
Yes.
nuts.
Mhm.
California, you get to choose by law that was passed there. And any male would want to choose to be in a female prison. Why? Because men and women are actually different. I'm going to go online saying men and women are not the same. If anyone
Well,
I'll take-
disagrees
Frank, you
with
really went out
they-
on a limb there.
yeah, if anyone
take folks.
disagrees that men and women are the same, go to your state prison and
Wasn't it-
view how many violent felons there are that are male versus violent felons that are female. It's just
Well,
way out of proportion.
Well, and how many
Wasn't
sexual
the-
assaults?
And sexual assaults.
Actual perpetrators are
Yep.
in female prisons versus male. That's just putting the predator in with the prey.
Well, down at the
Exactly.
point of the mountain, the female prison was this little standalone
Yes.
box house for forever.
Minimum
Well, the
security.
male prison was huge, and the female
Yes.
prison looked like it might have held lawnmowers. It was so
Yeah.
small.
Yeah.
But wasn't it New Jersey? It was last year. One female inmate impregnated 3 other female inmates in a New Jersey prison.
Wow.
I thought that was in
Yeah.
California.
You know,
No, it was in New Jersey.
part of our problem with this issue is really checking out our sanity. You know, it's becoming ludicrous, and this kind of dovetails into another one of my big issues. I want to protect women's bathrooms, especially girls'
Thank you.
bathrooms, schools and sports, with 0 exceptions. I don't care if they're on T blockers. Really, I mean, it's still a guy. You know, and how many women, girls, especially under 18, are clamoring to get into the men's locker room?
That's
Almost
something
nobody.
I want to bring up. When we were having an issue, one of our guests was on talking about how Salt Lake County said it was okay for somebody who identifies or looks the way they look to go into the restroom of their choice. And I was saying, okay, I want to protect girls, and I'll see this one all the way through. I want to protect that trans boy that's walking into a man's locker room. That young lady is just as much in danger as the other way around. When we stop admitting that men and women are different and that tendency and threat is still there, when these little girls, dads going into a restroom and there's a man in there, that
Yeah.
man is in danger. With most
Yeah.
of the fathers I know in Utah, that man's in danger.
Yeah, and that's the interesting thing is it's 1,000 to 1 or more that the biological woman that goes into men's, she's in danger from the other men in there, and
It's
1,000 to
true.
1 at least or more the biological boy that goes into a girl's restroom is endangering the girls. And it's also, I really believe that it's also a religious issue and a privacy issue, and no one's talking about the religious and privacy issues of those girls. They should not.
No one's talking about the girls, period.
Yeah. And
It's always a trans bill. It's never a pro-woman bill or a
Yep.
girl-safe bill. It's always about pro-trans, which is 0.5%, if even that, of the population. And we are dropping and putting everything to a halt to protect this small group when the majority of young ladies out there aren't getting protection that they deserve.
Yep. Absolutely. And the thing that troubles me is that there is some exceptions in the bills that we have. I think they were not given guidance by the AG's office. Most of the time, the AGs, and I'm including the last several, because I worked for 3 of them, starting with Wilkinson, Van Dam, Jan Graham. Then there was Mark Shurtleff. I didn't work for him. And then there was Sean Swallow. I didn't work for him. And Shannon Reyes. I didn't work for him. But none of those guys are at the legislature saying, hey, this is what we need to do. But guess what? I do go to the legislature free of charge. I don't charge Facebook because they're not my client. I've gone there as a private citizen. And often it's because Gail Rizicka or Eagle Forum or something says, hey, Frank, this is an important constitutional bill. Can you come down and help out on it? And I try to rearrange my schedule literally and come down to help fight for or against bills. And this is something the AG's office, the Attorney General, should care about these enough to do research, understand where the law is, and weigh in on it. And that's just none of the other candidates are even talking about that, again, because they don't have the experience that I do of actually going down to the AG's office. I mean, down to the legislature.
You have It's again, it's the media who is the fourth branch of government right now.
Yes.
And right now we have got, if we switch gears a little bit, along with these social, you've got the social, well, they used to be called disorders, and that's actually, what, 5 years ago that it was body
Just a
dysmorphic
few.
disorder.
Yep.
And now all of us have to not only accept it, but we got to play along, and at the danger of potentially young girls. But
Well, it's more than play along. They want us to honor it,
celebrate
and worship it.
Yes.
And my question is, like, right now, the look of Utah is that we are a sanctuary state.
Yeah.
Or at least Salt Lake City is a sanctuary city, even though the
And
governor
Moab.
came out and said we are not. However, the fact that we have got a lot of migrants moving in here, a lot. And I don't know what the governor knows and what he doesn't know, but I do know the governor from New York sent him on a plane
Yes.
to Salt Lake City Airport, and they are coming in, and our homeless population is rising, and that comes, the violence is rising. Salt Lake City is not the city it used to be even 15 years ago.
And the
because I work
crazy.
downtown.
Yeah.
Crime is happening. Our police officers are in more danger. Our police officers' hands are tied. Their hands are tied at the jails. And we're doing this all under the guise of this insanity. Instead of we're paying money to protect other countries' borders.
Yes.
We're not even protecting our own. How can you, as an AG, because I know the AG, Ken Paxton, he's highly engaged in Texas, but that's a border state.
Yeah.
What can you do as an AG in Utah to demand that we are sovereign and we protect our borders, that ICE has to come in and take these people, or they're going to stay in our jails, and the state government isn't going to get in your way because you do work to protect us, the citizen.
Yes. Yeah. And this is, I think, another huge distinction. Since I'm in the trenches on these these issues, I've actually worked with the Immigration Law Institute and people like this in the past, again, free of charge. But I actually have a plan to get rid of this. And I will take it to the legislature as soon as I get the Republican nomination. If I get 60% at the convention, I am the Republican candidate, but I know that one person's going to pay for signatures. I'm not. I'm a convention only candidate. But if once I get that nomination, either through a primary or getting the 60% at the convention, because even if I get 60% at the convention, listeners need to understand, I still face a primary if someone buys the votes. And so if they buy the signatures, I'm stuck with a primary anyway. And so, but once I get past that, like June 26th, I'm going to ask to meet with the legislature, and I've got the plan I'm going to unfold. And it's going to include the de facto sanctuary state that we have, because the feds did try to denominate us, ICE, as a sanctuary state. They did for a short period of time. They withdrew it, but we are de facto. Why? Because we're not stopping it. And so they're dumping people here willy-nilly. I'll go to the legislature and say, look, let's make this a felony to aid or abet or transport or conspire to bring anyone or to pay for anyone coming into the state of Utah that's an illegal alien, and make it a felony. Do you know how many pilots are going to fly here? How many services are going to go on?
I'm worried, Frank, that one of the reasons, though, that I've heard in the past, and it's been a few years, but that the Mormon Church was helping bring a lot in, and they were sponsoring and watching over. Would that collide at all? Because churches, not just Mormons but Catholics, I mean, they're bringing them in.
Yeah, the Catholic.
This is what I want people to understand, and there may be it's not the first time where goodness is misguided. And what I want to just show them is this has been an issue since I was in my first year of college back in 1980. It was the national debate topic for all colleges all across the country was the border crisis. Can you believe it? But I'm going to tell you something.
That's crazy.
I still remember those statistics in my head about these kinds of people that were crossing, and because they were the pros and cons argument, right? A lot of the people that were crossing were going back or sending money back to their families. It's a radically different situation now. It's not economic. It's terrorists. It's people from China. It's people from the Middle East and Africa, and a large part aren't even Mexico. But when they go through Mexico, they get extorted and sometimes tortured, sometimes killed, abused. It is this is the greatest evil in terms of
It's an
border crossings
invasion.
that we've ever
This is an
seen.
invasion.
And so Biden is basically saying, let's kill this country by what he's doing, because he is even like 10 times worse than Obama. I'm serious. He's
Oh,
10
yeah.
times worse than Obama
He's
on this
Obama
issue.
2.0.
Well,
and
he's 10 times worse. Obama technically deported a lot of people.
he
No,
was
he
the one who
did.
deported
He-
the
he-
most.
He did.
Obama's rhetoric also made him have to deport a lot of people, but it
Right.
made him sound good.
So Frank,
Yes.
do you back Donald Trump then?
Oh, absolutely. I think the thing is here is that, and I want to stretch out to everyone, because I know that there are some people might be listening that might not be favorable to Trump. I just want to let them know this. One, I'm an attorney. I'm a career attorney, 36 years. And I also work with Alliance Defending Freedom. They have said, and this is a non-political statement, they have said that Trump in his appointees, not just the U.S. Supreme Court, but in the circuit courts of appeal, that
He
Trump
saved us.
changed the face of the Ninth Circuit, the most reversed in the country, to the point where you can actually potentially win a religious freedom case now in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. You couldn't do that before Trump. And so,
Not only that, though, Frank, that all those appointments where he filled all those judges, where he did all of that, like in the first couple years, that made it so Roe v. Wade could be changed. That made it so police officers actually could get a fair trial in some places or an appeal, not in everywhere. But it literally gave us hope. And even though we went like down so terribly, those appointments still are there in effect today, and they still can be there to help us.
Yes. Yeah.
And I hope that Trump, when he gets in, I hope we have a number 50 AGs that are ready to implement policy that's ready to go day one. Because here's the deal. This is the first time in history that the border has been a top issue for Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's just
everyone
happened over the last few months.
And the thing that does concern me, honestly, is I think that it's easy for attorney general candidates to jump on board with what people care about that they listen to. And this is why I keep harping on this so much, that actions speak louder than words. If these issues were really all that important to the other candidates, why haven't they done anything about them? There's a lot you can do. Like I said, I work with the Immigration Law Institute. I've worked with the Alliance Defending Freedom, that actually is one of the biggest organizations in the country that defends our liberties, constitutional rights. I've also, even apart from them, I've done that kind of a thing on my own. And so, that if the reason I say my motto of my campaign is trusted experience, because yes, I have a lot more experience than anyone else. One candidate has significantly more than the other two, because the other two have slim to none in terms of legal experience. But what I will say is this, is that it's trusted experience because I've already been fighting these issues. So why can you trust Frank to be pro-life? Well, I can name off a whole bunch of things that I've done for pro-life in terms of defending, sidewalk counselors in front of an abortion clinic from criminal prosecutions. So I actually have criminal defense experience, helping out Pro-Life Utah, helping out pregnancy resource centers all the time, and meeting with a woman who's about to give an abortion from Pro-Life Utah, meeting with her, and she changes her mind after I'm able to meet with them. So there, it's, and finally, I filed a brief in support of our pro-life law last year, before it was argued before the Supreme Court last September. And so I like to say, what I'm going to do. And if you have any question, go to adflegal.org. Tell people to go Alliance Defending Freedom, adflegal.org, and just look at that organization. I'm an honor guard attorney with them because I've spent hundreds and hundreds of hours vindicating people's constitutional rights without charging them a dime. And I think that's where you really show your true colors. Are you interested in money or power? A lobbies group, backing you? Is the Governor Cox backing you? These kinds of things, or do you really care about these issues because you care enough about them that you're not going to, charge somebody to help vindicate these rights?
So that doesn't, what kind of lawyer spends all that money to get his degree only to do all this charitable work? What are you, crazy? Are you crazy, Frank?
Well, people ask me that, but I will tell you this, that one, I actually am not all about money. I do read my Bible daily, and there is a lot it says about the love of money. You can actually read that a lot.
That is true.
And there's a lot saying about giving to God, and things like this, and that God gives us what we need. And some of the work that I have, like defending sheriffs, that pays enough for me to help my 5 kids, get through college. And I don't need to be a millionaire. I could make a lot more money if I didn't defend sheriffs, if I was just in private practice, and if I didn't take all these free cases. But one thing I can say is when I actually I know I'm going to get paid by the sheriffs, which is nice. It's a nice relief, but it also helps fund me being able to help other people. And there's actually a myriad of ways I help people. I often help abused women get protective orders for free. And I will say this, and I've been doing this for decades. Every time I help, every woman I've helped get a protective order has always got it granted. So yeah, someone will say, well, some of these are frivolous, right? Well, not the ones I have. They're not frivolous. They get granted because it's actually a big thing. And our courts are not doing very well at helping abused women and children. I have to say it's just, and yes, someone might be listening. Well, sometimes isn't the woman abusive? Yeah, it's about 1,000 to 1 again, though. I've actually represented some men that were actually abused, but it's way in disparity, and it's something that the courts really don't handle very well. They have jaded attitudes, and it's really a difficult thing. And so I've helped a lot of women in those situations, either free of charge or very low cost, because why? They can't afford it.
Frank, can you tell me why prosecutors right now are choosing not to prosecute criminals? Like what is happening in these blue cities and states where they're letting criminals out only to hurt their citizenry? I don't understand it.
Yeah, if you're looking at like New York, Chicago, and San Francisco, and Seattle.
I'm looking at Salt Lake City.
And now we can also include Salt Lake more and more into that. They're derogating their duties. They're believing the lie. It's a incredible lie that somehow prosecuting crime is racist. Well, you know what? I don't think that those people that say that really care at all about racism, because I would throw it back in their own lap. I'd say, prosecutor, have you ever taken a case to vindicate racial discrimination? I actually have. Yes, it does happen. I've vindicated people's rights in racial discrimination. These attorneys that sit in their ivory tower and these mayors, because they're almost always liberal mayors in these big cities, including Salt Lake, they don't really care about racism. They don't care about any of these things. All this politics is what
it's virtue signaling, and yet it doesn't matter your race. When you let these violent criminals out, they hurt people of their own race and other races. So if it's about race, protect the neighborhoods these people are being released in, and that's horrendous. So we have a few comments. Do we have you until 6?
Well, you know what? I think I have to leave before then. But I think we have at least another half hour.
Okay, perfect.
I didn't know if we needed to rush you. Jared's been showing your website, and then also that one you were just showing, the Alliance.
The AFL.org.
That's impressive.
Yeah, that one, that Alliance, ADF.org.
Alliance Defending Freedom. Yes.
Yep. It's ADFlegal.org. And again, there's a hot link right to it in the show notes. They've got a lot of stuff here. It says 15 Supreme Court victories. That's not a small number.
No, it's hard.
80%. Yeah. 80% win rate, 30 plus years defending rights, and over 4,500 network attorneys.
Yeah. So
is this for somebody who might have had their free speech violated or their parental rights and they need help? Is this the place that they go to, or what is this?
It is. It absolutely is. And I'm basically the boots on the ground person in Utah. to handle these things. Sometimes it's a letter to a college or a high school. Just recently, it was to a high school discriminating against a conservative religious club, and things like that. And because these principals believe the lies, and so, or sometimes they believe it themselves because that's who they are, and they think, oh no, we can't have anything religious, or no, we can't have anything conservative. It might offend somebody. No, that's just garbage. And sometimes it's a letter that we have to send like that to get them to reverse their policies on these. So, but it's for everything. There's parental rights, there's religious freedom, you name it. They're fighting for girls and women's sports on the lower levels as well as collegiate level. I was going to file a suit with them against the university in Utah before COVID hit, and COVID hit and knocked out all the sports. And then Utah did pass the law, and so then they went, with some other litigation that they had.
So is that, with stuff like that, you got something for dad rights too? Because I know men in Utah have struggled a lot with getting some custodial rights of their kids. And it's been really weird. With some states, it's pretty 50-50, but it's a little extra hard. I know a few people, great dads, that have had to fight tooth and nail, and I don't even know where to send them.
So this is another thing. I used to handle a decent percentage of custody cases, and yes, I also did represent men sometimes. But I'm always picky. I'm very picky with the issue of divorce. I'm very picky with DCFS cases, parental rights cases. I don't want to represent the abuser. I honestly always want to represent the good woman or the good man. In these, and I've gotten custody for men. In cases of their, once they're 3 children, and I've defeated protective orders that were bogus. So again, some of them are bogus.
That's a whole nother issue. DCFS as a whole, we've had this come up a few times where, like the DOJ, they're overstepping, and they're actually profiting from overstepping, and they're stealing your children from you, or hospitals are stealing your children from you because they don't agree with the way you're treating them. And I want to get some comments here before we get too far ahead.
Sure.
So what is your opinion on the Republican Party in Utah? And do you think the Republican Party actually stands for the principles it claims to? That's from O'Malley May.
Well, so that's a very broad question. I will say this, that back in the 1990s, I was the chair of the Young Republicans, and I was just as conservative then as I am now. Maybe I'm getting more conservative, I don't know, but I think I was actually just as conservative. And I was part of the group that was part of the Constitutional Bylaws Committee. I was the chair of it, that actually got through the requirement that you have to read the platform and you have to sign the platform if you're a candidate. That didn't exist before I was pushed that through back in the 90s. And so
that
that's
just
why,
makes sense.
Yeah. And so that was a step to try to deal, I think, with what that questioner was talking about. This is a constant battle. And I will say that we have to be more vigilant than ever. I understand why people sometimes say, I'm abandoning the Republican Party. I'm not going to do that. I might be one of the last persons standing before I have to abandon ship, but I'm going to keep fighting, to keep us conservative, keep us caring about the constitutional values, because honestly, our state and our country depend on it. We're in a teetering position right now. I feel like there's a lot of states. I feel so sorry for people in Eastern California, Washington, and Oregon.
But they voted for these policies.
No, they didn't. Not in the East. Not in the eastern parts of those states.
The East and the North, they're victims.
And they're controlled. They're controlled by, like, California, often a lot of Eastern California, Eastern Washington, Eastern Oregon. I used to live in Eastern Washington, so I know for a fact they're very, very conservative. Right? Seattle blows them all away. They can never get around the fact that Seattle's population center blows away the entire state of Washington.
Yeah, and Portland in Oregon.
Mm-hmm. And Portland,
and
I've
seen them trying to secede into Idaho, which was very interesting. She also asked, did you take any cases during COVID against the vaccine mandates? And I'm curious about this because I know of some law enforcement officers that were voluntold they had to get that vaccine. And I'm wondering about a lot of companies that required mandates. The government didn't have to do one mandate. They let the companies all do it to the people and the citizens. And we're seeing, rapid cancers, and we're seeing, these different illnesses. Have you yet had any cases involving the COVID mandates?
Yeah, and like I said, almost any issue you want to bring up, I've probably already handled it. And this is why I'm running for Attorney General. But where was our Attorney General during COVID? You know, Alito from the U.S. Supreme Court toured the country and said it's the biggest retraction of our civil liberties that he's seen in his entire lifetime. And yet, where was our Attorney General? He was mum. You didn't hear anything out of him. And there's nothing out of the other candidates. They didn't do it. They didn't lift a finger to fight this. But guess what? People called me. Churches called me. Christian schools, religious schools called me and said, Frank, can we meet? And I said, yes, you can. One, First Amendment, religious expression and religious freedom. And two, you're not a place of public accommodation. You're a public, you're private, and you do not have to worry about this law. And then secondly, the Alliance Defending Freedom called me up and said, Frank, can you help us because people want religious exemptions and we need more help. And so I help people all over the country get religious exemptions to the vaccine because they were in these healthcare companies. And let me tell you this, everyone in these healthcare companies, so some of them are Fortune 500 companies that have a number of employees that never see a patient. And one of them actually worked at home and he telecommuted and they still said, nope, sorry, Biden's mandate, you have to get this. And then they had like ACLU attorneys that I literally had to fight against and say, nope, you're not answering this. You're not answering this. I don't care. You don't give them your pastor's name. You don't give them your church's address. You don't have to give them any of that nonsense. And by God's grace, everyone I helped get an exemption got it, including my daughter, who's a nurse at Primary Children's Hospital.
Outstanding. What's your thoughts on the ACLU? It seems like the ACLU actually stood for civil liberties up until 2016, and they've lost it.
2016? I think we lost them well before then.
We lost them about 40 years ago, I think.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, the ACLU fought to, not that I support the Nazi party of the U.S. marching through Indiana, but they fought to let him do it in the 80s.
Well, here's an issue that is relevant today because Mike Lee brought it up about FISA. You know, the ability for the federal government, FBI, to listen in on our text, emails, and phone calls. Again, unlike my candidates that I'm running against, I fought this issue back then, and I'll tell you this: the ACLU was sitting next to me in a Senate hearing that was a Judiciary Committee, and it was chaired by Senator Hatch. This is right after 9/11. Remember when we wanted to pass all these laws to fight terrorism? And I again cited Benjamin Franklin that if you give up our essential liberty for safety and security, you will get neither. And I also pointed out that this isn't. We don't want an overreaction against citizens. This should be against terrorists. This should be against, not.
And terrorism is an idea. It's not necessarily a person. It's an idea. Yeah. So how do you protect yourself from an idea? You've got to profile people. You've got to see people in their homes, land, and see what they're doing over there.
Yep.
With this, though, I mean, with the COVID stuff, I'm surprised there's not been more personal lawsuits or, criminal charges against like Fauci and this man-made virus that was paid for by the United States government.
The people are too busy fighting for their lives in a hospital.
Okay, they want to know if Governor Cox is endorsing you, which I don't think that's
he's endorsing Brown, isn't he?
He endorsed Brown before anyone had announced they were running, which is irresponsible because I'll tell you that Governor Cox has more legal experience than Derek Brown. It's absurd. He hasn't really practiced much in Utah. Very, 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 very little. He claims he practiced with Mike Lee. He was a new attorney. In Washington, D.C., he was in the same law firm as Mike Lee. Mike Lee has way more litigation experience than Derek Brown. Yet he was basically the deputy personnel director for Mike Lee. He worked for also Bennett. So I don't know why he doesn't mention, I worked for Senator Bennett and I worked for Senator Hatch. Then I ran for the legislature. Then I was a lobbyist. Then I worked for Lee. Then I was a state party chair. Then I was a lobbyist, and so honestly, it's a little insulting to me that two of the candidates, one's not even licensed in Utah, would actually say, I'm running for attorney general, as if legal experience means nothing to them.
Can I just ask you, who give us some ideas of who is endorsing you.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot, and I'll tell you this: since I'm unfortunately practicing law full time, I don't have much time to do anything. I
Right.
have raised enough funds, and I could raise a lot more if I had the time. But I've actually done reasonably well. I have enough for the convention, and more than enough for the convention. But I've got Mitch Velos, who's a seminal gun rights guru in Utah. Wrote the book Utah Gun Laws.
All right. So you
Check.
win. You're done. You don't have to continue. You're good.
Well, I've got a lot more.
I mean, not that I'm a gun
You're
supporter,
gonna love
but
this. He's got more.
So I've also got Mike Ferris, who is one of the top constitutional litigators in the country. He started Homeschool Legal Defense Association back in 1983 when it wasn't legal to homeschool in most states, including Utah, basically. And he then went to the Alliance Defending Freedom as the president and CEO of that organization. He helped author some of the Texas AG's opinions, and he has endorsed my campaign. But there's also a number of people, like there's American Moms, there's a number of sheriffs.
Which sheriffs? Like my sheriff?
It's actually, I'm getting
Tooele
actual
County?
letters from them. So I'm Tooele County. Actually, Paul Wimmer's been fantastic.
Paul
Mike-
Wimmer highly appreciates, and he has said this publicly, and so I don't think I'm breaking any rules for you, but our own sheriff has actually said that you have helped so many different in so many different ways with the Sheriff Association, and that you're well trusted and really a good guy. And I think Paul's endorsement goes a long way with the people of
it goes
Tooele County.
forever with me.
Good.
Paul
Yeah.
is outstanding
Paul is
human
one
being.
of those sheriffs that is constitutional based, and
Yes.
during the lockdowns and all of that, I just remember him standing up to our board of health and to our county commission and saying, my deputies will not be arresting or separating or dealing
Yep.
with masks or everything. This event is outside. We're not showing up to this. If there's a problem, call us, but it better not be anyone starting the problem, because these people aren't wearing masks, for crying out loud.
And I'm telling you that people like Sheriff Paul Wimmer, that's just such a breath of fresh air. They don't realize you don't have that in Salt Lake County.
Right.
I know a friend that works with youth, and they had an event in their parking lot trying to put, it's in Salt Lake City. They're trying to deal with some of these ridiculous requirements. The police broke them up and said, you can't be here. That's the police, because the police work for the mayor. So, and this is true in all cities all over the country. But when you have, it was a refreshing time when my sons and I we do a yearly motorcycle ride, and as we cruise through rural Utah, it was awesome to see. Wow, nobody's doing this mask thing, and they're saying, hey, we're green. We don't have any incidents. We have hardly any or something like that. And the sheriffs were really on board with this. Some of them, and I can't remember the ones that did this, some of them caught the state officials double or triple counting people as being different people with COVID, only because they would retest. So if they retest 3 or 4 times, they go, oh, there's 4 new right there.
And there's more money from the federal government into our coffers.
Yep.
That's ridiculous. So do you want to talk about Governor Cox? One of our viewers, O'Malley, is asking what your opinion is of Governor Cox. I mean, you are running for an office, and he very well. You do you. I don't want to tell you, but I'm sure that you have some opinions.
It's a hard thing to unseat a governor or a senator. It's extremely difficult. You have to be atrocious usually. And so I probably would have to work with him, which is even more important. Why I think this election, it makes it even more important. Why? Because we need an independent voice. We don't need someone that's lock stock, with the governor on every issue, especially when he doesn't have legal experience. So he doesn't have the ability to stand back and say, wait a minute, this is what the law requires. And so the thing that did very much upset me with Governor Cox a couple of years ago when he vetoed the women's sports bill, I just thought that was out of line. You don't, this is an important bill. We should not be playing political correctness in Utah. We are supposedly a conservative state, but honestly, my daughter went to school in Florida, and I feel like Florida is way more conservative than Utah in practice. You know,
Yes.
Yeah.
we actually have people that are very conservative, more conservative than Florida, but somehow they lose their minds or something when they get elected, and they steer toward these weird middle ruts that are pushing you liberal.
It's weird. It feels like Cox did that. He got steered towards the ultra center ground. And I think DeSantis, because he ran against a crackhead weirdo and then got the endorsement of Trump and then had ideas on the presidency, he steered himself further right than I think he naturally is.
Well, I will
And
say
so-
this, that I will say this, that I wouldn't want to take away anything from DeSantis in his own right, you know.
Oh, I'm not.
Because I
I'm
think
not,
he was
because
I think he was rock solid conservative in Florida. And I think that, but I think that it's just not his time to run. And he wisely said, okay, I'm going out and I'm endorsing Trump. And I think that was a wise thing to do.
definitely.
But
I'm just looking at
He's talking about when DeSantis
his,
first was
his
running
short
for
record,
governor
his
in
short
Florida.
record in Congress. Not that, I mean, he was a junior congressman, so he didn't make the headlines a lot, but he wasn't a hardcore conservative pusher there.
Yeah, that could be.
But I think because of his election and he saw this is what works.
Yeah, the policy.
It drove him further right, which I think is a good thing. And I give him kudos for recognizing that.
Yeah,
well, and I think when we saw him speak at the state convention, and this is 2 years ago. Was it 2 years ago? Yeah. Yeah, because Carson. So when Carson Jorgensen brought him in, and DeSantis was brought in, and I just remember and having met Kristi Noem and heard her speak, and she was on a stage with Mike Lee talking about how every single week during the COVID start of that to stop the spread, she's on a whole bunch of Zoom calls with all these governors and all these states, and they're talking about how they're going to shut down. And she's like, I'm sitting here with my entire staff and all these attorneys, and I'm trying to tell them, show me in the Constitution where I have the right to shut any business down, to shut schools down. And she said, week after week after week, it became less and less governors on the call. They'd shut down. And to the point where she was the only one that didn't shut down. And then when we listened to DeSantis give his speech, I thought immediately it dawned on me, if we had 50 governors like him, the federal government would be done.
Yeah,
they would be done.
Honestly, one of the things that I think is important that I think it's important that he stay as governor right now, because the way he's changed Florida is unbelievable, and the way he let out and saying parents are in charge of whether their kids wear masks in school, and fighting the feds on those trying to overregulate it, trying to take lunch money away from kids. You know, he stood firm on those, and unfortunately, like I said, here you had these extremes. You had California, New York, and then you had Florida. No different instances in Florida, and yet they kept the businesses open.
Yep.
You know, and everyone went bankrupt in New York and California. And honestly, I feel like we, as Utah, we were too leaning. You know, we weren't exactly in the middle, but we were leaning, I think, too much toward repression when we started. It started loosening finally, but we overreacted. I think
our governor definitely did, and I think that's because our governor. What we need to do is we need to take the capital and move it out of Salt Lake City. We need to put it. I honestly think we need to move it like into Provo.
Yeah,
where you can get a mix, because I think that's what corrected the governor. Because remember, he was trying to put out whether you're a consequential worker or whatever. Essential worker.
And you're talking about Governor Herbert?
No, it was Cox.
Cox was the governor then.
Yes,
it was
he was.
Herbert, I think it was Herbert.
It was Herbert.
Cox was running the task force.
Okay, yeah, and Herbert tried putting that out.
He did.
And when it got out to us rural people,
he said,
because I would have been listed as one, the rural screamed. They said, "What is this BS?"
Yeah.
He said no, and that's what shut him down. So I think it's because
counties to decide for themselves.
I think it's because the governor is situated there, and he's just got a sea of blue morons in every direction around him. So that's all he knows.
press people.
That's-
You know, the press is so
yeah.
liberal, and people listen to the press and they think that's where everyone is. So when they're holding up their finger to see where the wind's blowing, it's the
Mhm.
press that's blowing it. And
Shout out to Brian Schott. Good to see
Yeah.
you. He mentions us once in a while. He's the one who gave us our name.
Awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's a gem,
Yeah.
a gem amongst other slightly better
You know,
gems.
the thing that I noticed though is for us, we believe local control is the most
Yeah.
important, and it has the most control over our lives. And
Yeah.
I'm looking at your resume. I'm really impressed.
Thanks.
I'm impressed that you do this because you love people, obviously. Because I don't know very many attorneys that do so much for free and for cause. You know, I know that religious liberty is highly important. And what people forget is that the Constitution says nothing about a separation between church and state.
Right.
And yet we've allowed them to eliminate God and the
Yep.
Bible and everything from schools, and you can't pray in school and all.
Yep.
Over a letter written regarding the question. It's not
Yeah.
in the Constitution, and people don't understand that, but we haven't fought back. And
Yep.
now you see these pro-life people trying to give counsel to women outside at a clinic, and they're getting arrested,
Right.
and they're serving time. Like they're looking at 10 years in some states.
Well, I actually was able to vindicate mine. And so we got off, you know, but it was a completely bogus prosecution from beginning to end by a liberal mayor and liberal police.
Is that in Utah though?
Yeah, I defended pro-life sidewalk counselors in Salt Lake City who are being criminally prosecuted for exercising their First Amendment rights. And so I actually have had that case, and by God's grace, it went to trial and we won.
Great. And so my question is, how many states are you able to practice in? And if you practice, if you're the AG of Utah, are you able to practice in DC in front of the Supreme Court, or does that require something different?
Yeah, only one other candidate is actually licensed to practice before the U.S. Supreme Court, but I think I'm the only candidate that's ever filed as counsel of record. That means that you are the attorney that's in charge of the brief, writing the brief and submitting the brief. And so that's a big difference. Is if you have 4 or 5 or 6 attorneys on it and your name's on it too, I don't know what that means, but I will say that I file a lot of briefs. I filed a brief in favor of the Hobby Lobby case, in front of Defense of Marriage, defending counselors in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals against laws that prevented religious counselors from counseling minors about sexual confusion. And so these things, I kind of just do them, honestly, a lot of these. I mean, if you Google me, I tell Google all the candidates. Just see what you find. Now, if you Google find an attorney, Google Westlaw and Lexis. Find an attorney and say, hey, will you Google these 4 candidates and tell me what comes up? Print out what comes up. You'll see a huge stack of my cases. You'll see a little bit of Rachel Sarah's because she's actually done some significant work. And I give that to her. She worked about 6.5 years in the AG's office. I worked 12 years in the AG's office. You'll find 0 to none of the other 2. It's ridiculous. And it's like, okay, they're going to be an attorney general. And you know, that's where I'm really going to encourage listeners. Do not just listen to rhetoric. These candidates are attorneys. They're smart. They speak well, and they're going to tell you what you want to hear. That's why I say actions speak louder than words. Look at the actions of what they've actually done without getting paid.
I'm telling you right now, the people are so pissed off with what's happening in our government that I think that I hope people will see through it if it is disingenuous. And there is a big difference. I know there's so many jokes about politicians, so many jokes about attorneys. You just write your own jokes at this point. Yep. But some of you are politicians and some of you are attorneys in this race. And so I think I recognize that right away with Rachel and with you. I know that I think Rachel's first thing she said to us on the show was, I'm not looking to be famous. I'm not looking to get all this praise and stuff. I want to get to work. I respect that a lot. I respect someone working and living their life by their principles, living the principles. There's extraordinary candidates in this race, and I have to stay neutral, of course, but I have enjoyed I've really enjoyed getting to know each of you, because you become Utah's top cop.
Mhm.
And having a law enforcement family and knowing the value of having at least somebody to stand for you when the media is all over you, and now society is all over you, and they're having riots in the streets over something you had nothing to do with, and people I know and love are getting physically injured by these rioters of the Summer of Love of 2020.
Oh, yeah.
And then Sim Gill's letting them out the
Yep.
same, revolving door, all in.
Yeah.
I don't think people realize when law enforcement doesn't have protection from the state. I get it. There's bad
Yeah.
cops, there's bad nurses, there's bad priests. Everybody has something bad.
Yep.
But when your law enforcement doesn't have the backing of their state, it's a terrifying place to live, because law enforcement won't show up for you if no one's showing up for them. And that's just go to Baltimore.
Yes. And what I want the listeners to really take a note of is that all of the attorney candidates are going to say that they're going to defend law enforcement, but I am literally the only one that's actually defended sheriffs and police chiefs. And one of the great examples, you bring up the riots and stuff in Salt Lake. Look at that, what happened in Cottonwood Heights, where you have a conservative, excellent police chief, Robbie Russo, who's endorsed my campaign also, by the way. I didn't finish my endorsements, but that's okay.
Yeah. Well, we got time. Finish the story and then get back to it.
But in any event, he wouldn't stand for that nonsense. He arrested people. He took them in. They assaulted. They threw urine and stuff on police officers. They insulted. They assaulted them, and he made arrests. And he, put cop cars down there and said, "You're not passing here. You're not going into these neighborhoods." And so honestly, kudos to someone like that. But he also knew I was defending him, and that I would be, fighting these things all the way. And so that does make a difference, especially when you're a conservative. Like he is, to be able to help him fight, and for him to know that, yes, I'm going to be defended in this is huge.
Well, if we want a law and order state, we want to feel safe in our country, which most of us don't right now.
Right.
And blue states, red states, we're watching an invasion before our very eyes.
Yep.
And we are pro Second Amendment all the way in this county.
Yep.
I know the state as a whole mostly is.
Yes.
And we want to make sure that we're going to protect ourselves. But if we protect ourselves, and then the media decides that we're racists who hate these illegal Democrats, as I like to call them, then we're on trial in the media for something that we're protecting our families, we're protecting our home. And that could turn on you any second. And if cops are going to go to jail over it, you certainly will.
Yeah.
And if you don't have an AG that is ready to stand up and fight on your behalf against your own government, if it need be, that is so important. That is
Absolutely.
so important. And in the law and order state, that's why I'm so passionate about Donald Trump, is because I've witnessed Donald Trump in action with law enforcement.
That's right. That's right.
And I watched him stand up after 8 years of Obama tearing our country apart with law enforcement and the community, just basically spitting on law enforcement.
Yeah.
And it goes from that to, hey, guess what? We need these men and women to stand on that blue line, because that's
right.
all that decides if the bad guy gets through or not. And so we need to protect them just as much as we need protection. So I appreciate it. Please continue with your endorsements.
Yeah, finish up your endorsements.
Okay, I'm going to miss some few. Chris Allred, Weber County Attorney. I know there's sheriffs all over. I know Nate Curtis down in Sevier County, Cody Black in Beaver County. There's Kevin Potter up in Box Elder County, Steve Labrum out in Uintah County. I mean, it goes on and on and on.
How about the Sheriff's Association?
Well, I don't think that they're allowed to as an association, but Scott Burns, who's the head of that, has endorsed me. He's also what is it? It's in Circleville. I can't remember the county.
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just saying, I think I thought they endorsed Greg Hughes, the association, a couple elections ago. Oh no, for Congress.
I'll check on that. I don't think that.
Reach out to him,
because I know that they would for sure. And so that's, but I know I'm missing some people, but also I think the American Moms. I don't know if I mentioned that before.
You did,
Mhm.
and that's
know,
incredible.
And so there's a number of these groups that are just, it's really starting to grow in spite of the fact that I'm having to practice law full time. I'm finally am a free man and can actually just be a campaigner on April 19th. Lord willing, that's when the case goes to the jury and I can actually start full-time campaigning for a change. So, but despite that, this race is growing. I have amazing volunteers, way more than any other candidate that I've seen. And $1 for my campaign, I think, goes 10 times farther than any other campaign because I just have so many people coming together and helping me. And so if people are listening, want to help, I would love that. They can just go to my website, Frank Mylar 4ag.com. And
there's a hot link for it in the show notes. Also a hot link for
And
the
you can show it right now.
AD. But yeah, I'm going to show it right now while you talk about it. So
And that
keep talking.
donate button, remember, donations help.
Yes, they do.
And
And again, this is very important. I'm one of the only candidates that actually is not taking money from any special interest group or corporation or any lobbyists. Lobbyists are donating. Lobbyists are donating to a lot of campaigns, but not to mine. Why? I don't want to be owned by them. You know.
Wow, that's bold. You are not a good politician, sir.
Well, like I said, we need an attorney, not a politician, and we need someone that's actually a constitutional law attorney and not pretend wannabes. We have armchair people that are saying that they're constitutional attorneys. Well, it's like, what in the world did you? They never have filed a civil rights suit to vindicate anyone's constitutional rights ever. You know, and so it's all theoretical. It's all smoke and mirrors, and people need to look beyond the smoke and mirrors. You can't lead this office if you are not a competent attorney. That is all there is to it. Competency is leading the attorneys in the office, making sure attorney general opinions are sound, which they not all of them are, making sure the attorneys are capable in doing what they're supposed to do, but then also leading out on some of these issues like the COVID issue and the immigration issues, the fighting the feds issues, the fighting for election integrity. These are things that you actually, it makes a world of difference if you are very familiar with the law and have fought in cases. And so it's just like there's two candidates that are basically not in the ballpark, and yet they're trying to say they can tell the pitcher what kind of a fastball or a curveball he's supposed to throw. You can't tell that pitcher what to throw if you're not in the ballpark.
Yeah. I agree. It's on the election integrity. I put it to so he looks bigger on the screen, but that means we got to squish together.
I only have a couple more minutes, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a couple things on there I saw. I just want to throw this out there: election integrity. I don't know what power the AG's office would have or pull,
Jesse Kelly.
but I would like to see if we could move our elections out of the lieutenant governor's hands. I think that is a serious breach. You've got support for Second Amendment on there, although I am not a gun owner. Yeah. I support the Second Amendment 100%.
I'm a gun owner. Yeah, and I shoot regularly.
I used to be, but I went boating, and it's a whole thing.
He's actually a gun trainer. So,
oh, great.
But
what about Jesse Kelly?
Do you know
who do you listen to on your podcast of choice?
Okay,
besides political head trauma.
So I will tell you this. I hate to say it, but I actually listen to American Center for Law and Justice.
Oh my gosh, boring.
Jay Sekulow, who talks about law cases all the time. Sometimes I listen to Al Mohler's The Briefing. Why? Because he mixes religion, history, and politics and the law. And I kind of just like that. And I put it on fast forward.
Yeah. So you can
and
hear
I listen
quickly.
to it while I'm getting ready in the morning because I just don't have a lot of extra time. You know,
oh yeah, if you're writing stuff, you can't listen to stuff and write. No. I operate a hammer, so I can't.
Is that what he said?
Is it called The Briefing?
The Briefing?
Yeah, The Briefing by Al.
I'm going to check that out.
You're such a nerd. I wonder if Tina listens to accountant podcasts where they just go zeros and ones.
But no, that's good. I like your website. Yeah, you've got great endorsements and all that stuff.
No money from lobbies or corporations.
Nope.
Yeah.
That's just
It's
Yeah.
what
That baffles me.
You
It
don't have to
takes the-
butter us up.
all right. I probably get
Yes.
better hit
Thank
the
you
road
so
here.
much,
So much.
everyone. This
We will
Frank.
see you Friday night next week for convention. Is that you'll be there? And then if
so
you're
that's
getting a booth, reach out to me.
Frank
Sounds good.
Mylar, Frank Mylar 4, the number 4ag.com. Go check him out if you like what he, read about him if you're interested.
It's very
And
interesting.
Check him
Google
out.
us.
It's outstanding.
Oh, and Google.
us. Yep.
Yeah, and Google him. All right, Frank, have a good night. Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Frank.
much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you guys. Appreciate it. Bye.
Bye.